The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate radio stations airing the show. Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM-LP at 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina. This is The Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of the show, you're free to do so. Just send us an email if you end up using any content. If you care to, you can send us letters at our new address, which is The Final Straw Radio, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina 28816. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop. This week we feature 3 segments. First, we'll feature a statement about recent doxing of a number of anti-racists in the Asheville area by far-right keyboard warriors. After that, we feature an interview with Dee, an anonymous incarcerated organizer affiliated with Jailhouse Lawyers Speak. In this conversation, we ask about the effectiveness of the 2018 nationwide prisoner strike, the push to move prisoners under increasing threats due to climate change, repression and changes in response to the strike, male limitations in PA prisons, standardization of increased security in Ohio, outside support and organizing, critiques of the methods of NPS 2018, and more. Check out our show notes for links to more info concerning the strike. For prisoners wanting to communicate with and or join JLS, Dee suggests near the end of the show that they reach out to Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, P.O. Box 1076, Knightdale, North Carolina 27545. In our final section of the show, you'll hear a report by audio comrades in Germany about the recent resistance to the destruction of the Hambach forest by authorities. The clearing of the ancient forest is to create the largest open-pit lignite coal mine in Europe on behalf of the corporation RWE, which sells to Netherlands, Germany, and the UK. Lignite has a carbon content of around 60 to 70%, has a low energy yield, and is responsible for 1/3 of CO2 emissions in Germany. This segment shows up in the November 2018 episode of Bad News, Angry Voices from Around the World from the A Radio Network, of which we're a proud member. Keep an eye on our podcast stream and website for a link to this episode coming out in the next couple of days. We are also a member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts. Here's a message from another member of CZN.
We hope that you are enjoying this episode of This is America, or the latest episode of the It's Going Down podcast. We know that a growing number of the proletarian community tune in every week to hear both resistance news and the latest headlines on everything from climate change to Trump.
Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell!
But before you fast forward that dial,
Hell no, it can't wait! Your lives will be affected!
we bring you a special announcement. We need your help this winter in meeting our fundraising goal of $10,000. So if you don't want to see IGD slowing down anytime soon,
Say hell no, motherfuckers!
go to itsgoingdown.org/shop. Give us a one-time donation, buy some awesome swag, or sign up to become a monthly supporter.
Now, I want you to go in that bag and find my wallet.
Which one is it?
It's the one that says bad mother.
And now, back to the show.
Within the last week, over 15 people were doxxed by white supremacists in our community. Here is most of a collective statement released a day or two after the fact by some of those folks. They've targeted more than 20 people they believe are involved in anti-racist organizing in North Carolina. They've posted information such as our home addresses, places of work, family members, license plates, social media profiles, whatever information they could find. They seem to be fixating on trans and non-binary people in particular, and delight in trying to deadname and misgender us whenever possible. Some of us and some of our family members have received harassing messages. They wrote about us like it's some big secret that we oppose fascism, that we oppose racism, that we oppose all forms of bigotry and oppression. It's not a secret. We weren't hiding. We are not ashamed. This isn't a plea for sympathy. Our friends and immediate community have been amazing. Rather, this is a message to let you know that if you ever find yourself targeted by neo-Nazis and the far right, you are not alone. None of us need to face this rising tide of fascist scum alone. We have each other. Robert Bowers, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter, actively and publicly chatted with alt-right trolls who had doxed anti-racist activists. He even discussed violence against anti-racists in our region. This is probably a good time to think seriously about your online security and that of your family members and friends. But staying safe isn't just a matter of changing your Facebook settings or making your Instagram private. It's a matter of us showing up for each other, of us not letting them intimidate us, not letting them isolate us, not letting them stop us from our work, especially when the work is stopping fascism. To read the full statement, you can visit ashevillesolidarity.tumblr.com, where you can also see a list of bands and businesses which have been included in the current harassment. And of course, there are ways to donate and send support. Additionally, for a really excellent walkthrough of how to help prevent this kind of thing happening to you and your crew, you can visit smilingfacecollective.github.io/guide-2-preventing-doxing. Doxing is with 2 X's. This site can be easily adapted into an interactive workshop because, let's face it, wiping your presence off the internet is a tedious, upsetting, and grueling process which is designed to wear you down. It's always better to do this in groups. You can write to us about your experiences with internet hygiene, good, bad, or whatever, at tfsradioshow@protonmail.com. For those in the Western North Carolina area, there will be a fall fundraiser to benefit rural organizing and resilience on Friday, November 30th at 6 p.m. at the Marshall Container Co., which is located at 10 South Main Street in Marshall. The event will center around a cornbread and chili dinner and will include several surprise musical guests. And finally, if you are in the position to donate to those injured yesterday fighting the Proud Boys in Philly and elsewhere, you can go to rally.org and search Support for Rose City Antifa's Fight for Survivors, which we will link in the show notes. Remember that if you donate, to do so anonymously.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. Could you introduce yourself to the audience, whatever you can say about yourself?
Yes. I'm a prisoner. My name is D. Been locked up now for a little over a decade and a half. Right now, I'm one of the members of Jailhouse Lawyers Speak. Also, I'm known for organizing with the National Prison Strike, part of the National Jailhouse Lawyers Speak organizing committee.
So these questions that I wrote up a little while ago are a little bit wordy, so please bear with me. So public conversation has been increasing yearly on the corruption of the American prison system, in particular its direct lineage in extracting forced labor from the poor, in particular black and brown bodies, often referred to as modern slavery. And more organizing has taken place around the country to attack money bail, to critique the predatory nature of policing and courts in communities of color, and to link the separations of families via ICE and incarceration with not only the role of prisons in the slavery of people of African descent, but the genocide of Native American peoples. What is your assessment on the status of awareness on prisons in the so-called U.S.?
Well, I think that over the last 3 or 4 years, I think we've definitely seen a uptick in the awareness of prisoners' circumstances in general. I think that has been in a large part due to a lot of the resistance that has been taking place in the news media, as well as particularly the grassroots media's willingness to cover it. Of course, there's still a lot that is not known because of the lack of transparency within the prison system throughout the nation. I will say this right here. I do think that overall, I think we are definitely making strides into getting the public to become more aware. But I do believe that we're still a very long way off. I think that the average American is not really cognizant of what is actually taking place inside the prisons due to a lack of transparency and due to the actual restrictions that prisoners have as it relates to free access to the media outlets.
So you mentioned that you're affiliated with Jailhouse Lawyers Speak and that y'all were some of the main organizers on the inside for the nationwide prison strike. In your view, how did the second nationwide prison strike go? Have you heard from other prisoners who've shared with you about it?
We've definitely been hearing from prisoners. A lot of the prison networks that have been writing to our local P.O. box. Some of their family members have been in touch through calls or also writing themselves, sending out emails from the prisoners inside. And from what all I can tell, I think that it went very well. I think a lot of people probably did not anticipate it to go as far as it did in such a short period after we had announced that this strike would be going down. So, in terms of the time period we had to organize for it and the actual response that we received from the public, it went great. It went great, especially as it relates to getting the ball rolling, momentum rolling, and bringing more awareness to the circumstances of prisoners throughout this nation.
Can you talk about the privileged position of the worker under the torturous yoke of incarceration in the U.S. among prisoners and the significance of prisoners refusing their position to participate in the strike? In particular, it seems like a use of a privilege in an interesting way, since it's kind of a loss of access to outside, a loss of potentially taking some time off of their penalty, off of their time inside. Can you talk about the role of the folks who put down their tools?
Okay. For those that say let the fields burn, what type of punishment they may have received or what type of privileges they may have lost in the process of this? Am I understanding the question correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that normally whenever a prisoner participates in a strike, particularly such as the one that just took place, what you'll find that prisoners will start losing. They'll start losing their privilege as it relates to visitations. They can be removed out of certain privilege units. We've received reports of prisoners being removed out of certain units that they lived in. Prisoners being transferred further away from home as retaliatory purposes. We've also, you also find that even the jobs, although the prisoners may not be working for that particular time period in solidarity with the strike, when it's time to go back to that location to work later, that job is completely lost, and they're usually placed into lockdown units or having to be assigned worse jobs. I would like to say this here that, as it related to the national prison strike, one of the things that was slightly different this time, and we're considering this strike, although it may be also listed as a boycott, was that not only did prisoners not go to work, but an overwhelming majority of prisoners also, we found later, that refused to use the phone. They refused to purchase items from the canteen. They refused to order food from these private vendors. So prisoners used a diversity of tactics as it relates to attacking the system, and not only attacking the system, but trying to raise heightened awareness to the conditions, the human rights violations that was taking place, that are taking place inside these prisons.
You mentioned a few punishments that administrations mete out against prisoners, such as transfers or lack of privilege, like taking away privileges. Can you talk a little more about what kind of repression prisoners have faced, and how do you think folks on the outside have done to follow up and support folks and support or defend their comrades on the inside?
I think, as it relates to inside, got to understand a lot of prisons, they have a lot of policies. And a lot of these prison policies, one of the things that they stipulate in these policies is that if prisoners refuse to work, then they will be losing certain privileges, or they can be disciplined. So a lot of times, a lot of flat out, I'm not going to work is automatically upheld as legal. And we know it's legal because the people have challenged, prisoners have challenged in different places these refusal to work policies that punishes them. And a lot of times the courts will uphold them. And we know it's a larger picture, a larger element at play here, which is the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which authorizes slavery in this nation, and which is why these prisoners get away with it. So nonetheless, though, So a lot of times we're finding that prisoners are also being placed on lockdown in lockup units as well. And I think I failed to mention that a little bit earlier. Some prisoners are being placed on lockdown or in lockup units. Some prisoners, before the strike even kicked off, I want to make mention too that a lot of prisoners was preemptively locked down. You had a lot of states like New Mexico. We just found out New Mexico locked down due to the initiation of prisoners saying they would no longer work or they would boycott the stores or, not purchasing items from the prison or use their phones. So a lot of these different tactics prisoners use, they definitely receive retaliation for it. And one of the ways that people outside can actually look into these issues and assist prisoners is by keeping up with some of the prison organizers on the outside that have networks set up or working directly with the prison organizations inside. Finding out who the prison organizations is. Off the top, I can tell you, something like Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, the Free Alabama Movement, outside, EWOC. You can work with EWOC. You can work with the Fight Toxic Prisons. They can give you information on kind of some of the repression that's going on. The National Lawyers Guild, they have a team set up where they're actually responding to some of the repression that's taking place throughout the nation as it relates to these strike, recent past strike.
How have you seen administrations and government officials learning from the striking methods? For instance, I heard that South Carolina and California got federal permission to block cell phone traffic around prisons in the run-up to the 2018 strike. And over the last decade, cell phones inside of prisons have been a major boon to organizers. Absolutely.
I think that definitely prisons, they are definitely prison cracks. They are definitely learning that prisoners have begun to use these tools in a more productive manner. And because of that, I think it has heightened the alert around the nation, particularly amongst the prison cracks, as to prisoners organizing and prisoners becoming more sophisticated with organizing throughout our networks, and they've definitely taken notice of it. This is why you find a lot of times they're definitely targeting prison leaders. They're trying to keep up with our social media contacts, as well as organizations outside that are directly linked with the prisoner-led organizations on the inside. So they've definitely learned, and they're definitely trying to destroy these networks. You have to look at it. We've moved into a new decade of organizing. And we can say if there's one instrument that has changed the way that prisoners are organizing now, that is through cell phone communications. And we're finding these prison cracks are going the extra mile to try to stop it, to try to shut it down. And hopefully we're also getting a little bit more smart and wise as well. And hopefully prisoners around the nation are preparing for the shutdown in their locations. I know we are, as Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, we are definitely preparing as well, so that the organizing energy that we've developed over the years is not lost.
So the Southeast was rocked this year, or actually just within the last month and a half, by two large hurricanes since the end of the strike, one coming right on the tail of the strike. Can you talk about the effects you've heard of on prisoners and how outside supporters have done, like whether they've done well or not done well in applying pressure to administrations to protect prisoners from the storm's ravages?
I have to say, I think this year it was more pressure on these administrators to move prisoners from the eye of hurricanes than any years past. This is the first year. I mean, the response throughout the response from the citizens, particularly through social media, has been, outstanding. So it was a lot of pressure. I think when sometimes you have these hard heads like Henry McMaster in the state of South Carolina that believes in dehumanizing prisoners, that has no sympathy whatsoever for prisoners on any level, that did not mind leaving prisoners in the eye of a hurricane, although he's telling every other citizen, they needed to evacuate. And so outside of that, I think any other rational governor would have, I'm just using South Carolina, for instance, would have removed the prisoners, in light of such force from the public. And I have to say that, like I say, the public, I think citizens, the response from people that care about prisoners' human rights was outstanding. And I think a lot of prisoners know this, and we understand that, and we understand the extra mile that people went to try to have prisoners removed from this area. I do know right now there are a couple of different organizations that are trying to figure out how to begin to pressure local states to create some type of evacuation policy for prisoners, because currently really states really have no type of executive orders to evacuate prisoners when it comes down to emergency situations in the state, particularly impending natural disasters that may be on the way to the coast. They have no, there's nothing that says they have to move us. And that's kind of scary when you understand that. And I think we saw that this time around. A lot of hurricanes they hit fast, and they did hit furiously. But we also saw governors like the governors in South Carolina and even in certain parts of Florida where they was not removing prisoners, period, and they was leaving prisoners where they was at. One of the things I like to point out, too, is a lot of misinformation that the prison cracks give to the citizens outside the gates. A lot of times they're telling the citizens they are moving prisoners out of natural disaster areas where pending hurricanes will be hitting. What they end up doing is they're removing lower security prisoners to maximum security prisons. But they give the public the impression like they're moving prisoners, when a lot of times they're just moving them behind and for extra security.
Which is just the general trend that incarceration in the U.S. is going anyway, no matter what reason they give, right? Is to increase the security of different facilities, like with these hunger strikes that have been going on and work stoppages that have gone on at Toledo Correctional in Ohio. It's because the administration is perpetually it's moving through and changing whole blocks of the prison into a higher level of security, right?
Absolutely. And we're finding that absolutely. One of the things, and another good example of that is not too long ago, I guess you say, out towards California, when the California prisoners won from when they did a massive hunger strike down that way, and so much public attention was placed on these solitary confinements that they started doing these step-down programs and moving prisoners to the population. And a lot of prisoners that was on Supermax, they begin to move them down to the population. Well, now what we're finding is that the population now, they're turning them into lockups now. Like in certain states right now, we're finding cell blocks that are being designed with plates over the windows, or there, if not plates, some type of steel cages to where you can't even see daylight out of it anymore. But this is in the general population. At one time, this was on solitary. So they just kind of transferring the location and fortifying the areas that people are not complaining about so much, but it's ending up being the same conditions. So, absolutely.
Have you seen a shift or heard of a shift in the way that administrations or that screws have reacted to prisoners in light of the nationwide strike? Like, we hear about cases of repression against people that are specifically targeted and accused of being organizers, but have you heard about the increased attention actually changing any of the on-the-ground relationship that incarcerated comrades have to deal with, like in a positive way?
As it relates to a positive way amongst the prisoners, I think that one of the things, too, I have to say this as well, I definitely can say this here, that the mail has become extra scrutinized now. I think that we are definitely losing on the angle of correspondence. I think it's an attack against prisoners' correspondence throughout the nation, because a lot of the comrades on the outside, they alert a lot of the prisoners on the inside to what's going on the outside and what's going on in other states with other prisoners, particularly as it relates to organizing. And because of that, prisoners around the nation as well have started to perk up the security on these on our correspondence coming in from citizens on the outside that have been corresponding, through their newsletters or through cards or, postcards or whatever it may be, that's keeping prisoners informed as to the changing dynamics throughout the nation in the prison movement. With that said, on the inside, I would say I think that the relationship, I don't think it has, particularly between the pig and the prisoner, I don't think that's too much changing. I think, you've always had you've always had a degree of hostility, a degree of indifference, particularly on the pigs' behalf, but you always had a degree of indifference. I don't really see any of that right there significantly changing as it relates to due to the prison movement, outside of the fact that they are definitely more alert. They're definitely looking for signs of any type of organizing as it relates to prison labor. I have noticed one thing: conversation as to 3-4 years ago. We usually just generally mention prison slavery or the job as a slave job. Now, when we say that, we're instantly noticing a change in behavior instantly of the pig that's on post, and usually they're reporting back that, hey, he just said something about slavery. So this is definitely new in the prisons now.
You mentioned changes in the way that administrations deal with mail and restrictions on that. And I know I'm throwing you kind of a few curveballs, not curveballs, but like throwing a lot of questions at you. And if you don't have a comment on this, that's okay. But do you have anything to say about the recent restrictions that are underway in the state of Pennsylvania concerning the scientifically provably false claim that people were sending in cannabinoids that were infecting the mail workers and leading to a privatization and limits of not only books behind bars, but also of physical mail?
There was there's been at least 2 or 3 prisoners from the Pennsylvania area that have been reported in. They believe that it was a preemptive strike to when they locked them down as it related to August the 21st, the national prison strike. They believe that it definitely was completely connected to that to contain them, to ensure that there was zero participation with their state as it related to the national prison strike. I also saw it as a tactic, another exploitative tactic as it relates to trying to force prisoners to buy from their vendors. This is a $1 million deal. It's not just millions, but millions of dollar deal, and over the years turns into $1 billion deal. You can start getting prisoners to purchase these books from them, whether it's over tablets or whether it's the actual physical book. And also, one last note, we have to also recognize too that also this is another way also to restrict prisoners' access to the outside world as well. One thing about prisons throughout the nation, and I always call it the fascist form of it, definitely, but we see it more closer in prison. But nonetheless, though, it's definitely to isolate prisoners from the rest of the world, so that way the prison cracks can always control the narrative of what the public outside of the prisons get.
Since before the 2018 strike even started, prison administrations have been hunting you and your comrades down in jailhouse lawyers speak. What does that look like, and how have you all been able to avoid detection, or is anyone facing specific charges and accusation of JLS affiliation?
We do have a few comrades that are facing some allegations, such as, like inciting a riot. We did have 2 comrades that was locked down pending the investigation. Not sure the outcome yet. We haven't gotten any correspondence from them recently. But nonetheless, one of the things, something, as it relates to Jailhouse Lawyers Speak particularly, these JLS members have always known that we accept the consequences of whatever's coming. Hold on one second. Sure. Okay, we already know that the repercussions for what we're actually doing. So before we go into it, we try not to raise a lot of cane unless about prisoners, particularly JLS members, being punished, or because what we do is we don't want to give confirmation to the system to who this individual is or their particular participation in Jailhouse Lawyers Speak membership. So but we are paying attention, and we do recognize exactly what's going on. And have they damaged us at all? I can tell you no, they haven't damaged us at all. If anything, we're definitely building up more membership. The membership is definitely beefing up in other places we didn't have JLS members at prior to the national.
There was a critique that y'all may have heard from within the movement to end racialized mass incarceration, that the nationwide prison strike leadership failed to consult inside and outside long-term organizers around prison issues, particularly pointing out white advocates in what was called leadership. Although the critique didn't name what organization was specifically being referred to, the leadership that I'm aware of, at least in terms of media presentation, included Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, IWOC, the Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, with individual prisoners' voices being amplified. Do you feel that this concern, an overwhelmingly white spokespersonship, that's out of touch with prisoner and outside community needs is well-founded? And by that, I didn't mean to skip over. It just occurred to me, Amani Sawari as being one of the outside spokespeople for JLS.
Absolutely, and she's a new African sister as well. One of the things I got to say this right here. I'll just say this right here as it relates to JLS. First of all, JLS speaks for themselves. And as it relates to who was leading the national prison strike, it was not led by outside organizers. It was led by prisoners on the inside. So, it's kind of a little bit baffling to our networks when we hear something like that as it relates to. And secondly, I have to say this because I know it's already been said by other JLS members. As prisoners, we're not looking for maternalistic relationships with anybody. We're not looking for any saviors. Our job in this movement that's going forward now, that has been going forward for the last few years, is for prisoners to start back standing up. We lost our voices some years ago, and this is why a lot of the fire left the prison systems. And part of the reason prisoners are in the condition they're in today, because we rely too heavily on outside organizers. And instead of relying on ourselves to stand up, which is why we tell any outside organizer, if you really want to help us, encourage prisoners inside to resist. Encourage prisoners inside to stand up on their own, too. Don't you just be our voice. We don't want you to be our voice. We want to be our own voice. Mm-hmm. Speak with us. You follow me? And that has been pretty much, that is where this movement is at. And this is what I think a lot of people still are not quite grasping, or they can't accept the reality of prisoners leading in this fight right here. So when it comes down to the racial element, we have to be very careful with that, because we have Caucasians involved in our movement as well. You have to understand the prison movement is very diverse. We have membership in almost all the things that we call race. We have, not only that, we have different tongues. We have different brothers and sisters involved with different religious movements that's locked up back here with us. This is the prison class is very diverse. So at the end of the day, we're not dealing with race per se. We're dealing with the prison class. And this is what we want people to be very much so aware of, and let people know that, hey, what you understood to be the old organizing elements may not necessarily be relevant today, So that's very important.
So here's a question that I didn't really formulate all that well, but it's kind of a two-pronged question. Some critiques from the outside supporters and the radical side have concerned the JLS-led nationwide prison strike prioritizing of the vote. Like, and this question comes right after a midterm election that a lot of people were saying was the most important election of our lifetimes. But so a prioritization of the vote when both some of the most committed solidarity from the outside comes from sectors that have come to view electoralism as a form of counterinsurgency and co-optation of movement energy, and also the sectors already aligned with reenfranchisement as one of the goals and already equipped for legislative lobbying are often connected to big NGOs or non-governmental organizations that ultimately shepherd rebellion into impotency and don't really give a about liberation.
Mm-hmm. And I can dig it. One of the things when we first started discussing the voting initiatives, we found that you have to understand we had 10 national demands. Actually, it was a little way more than that, but we narrowed it down to 10. And those are the 10 that are the most important. And remember, I told you earlier, our movement is very diverse. So we don't just have necessarily per se one particular ideology that is floating through JLS, or we're not connected with other prison organizations that are with one particular ideology. There's many different ones. And the thing is, when you're dealing with the prison class, we have to find some particular common ground that we can work on. There are short-term goals and there are long-term goals. A lot of the more immediate that we're dealing with now, prison conditions, this definitely, they can only be changed when we're dealing with such things as voting, like on the ballots, like, we have issues that a lot of times that are on the ballot that directly impacts the prison class, that if people don't speak up or say anything about these particular issues, then we are missing the bus. This is something we recognize in prison. So some things on the outside that may seem to be not really, worthwhile, or may not seem to be worthwhile in the long run as it relates to the liberation, and sometimes, from a New African perspective, we say for the liberation of the people, then, you can't necessarily equate prison interests with that. You follow me? We're specifically dealing with prison interests. We are forced to fight a certain type of fight in a certain type of way within certain perimeters. Those on the outside, they have the luxury to, hey, to fight this way or that way. We can't do that back here. We are forced. And if we don't fight in a certain way, then we die back here. You follow me? We die. We are the ones suffering the consequences because no one said anything about something that they could have very easily changed. So this is when we start dealing with the voting initiative. Now, the thing is, we have to be careful. Now, I will say this, is not to become co-opted, because there are some very serious revolutionary elements involved in our movement. We understand that. So therefore, we're not going to be co-opted. We're not going to be, all of a sudden, just all the way out somewhere else that nobody completely understands, and we just become completely mainstream prison organization. And the most important thing to understand is the prison class can never be mainstream. There's just no way for it to happen. It just can't happen. In my eyes, it can't happen. JLS, it can't happen. Hell, what we represent won't allow it to happen. So, but at the end of the day, this is why voting is very important to us. And it's not, and even when we're dealing with the reinstatement of the ex-prisoners' right to vote and trying to get prisoners' right to vote, these are angles that we are using to dismantle the prison industrial slave complex. This is our battle here. This is what we're fighting. We understand that our interests don't necessarily line up with everybody else's interests. And this is the reason why we keep saying these are prison class interests. And so when people are fighting and hear us saying certain things, recognize it's a prison class issue.
And it's notable that in Florida there was a ballot initiative that passed, which is going to lead to the largest reenfranchisement or enfranchisement of the American voting population since the allowance of women to vote, or the end of restrictions on women voting earlier in the 19th or the 20th century. So that's, that's a pretty big. See how that changes the shape of things if that were to generalize. Absolutely. Are there any words that you specifically would like to share to any prisoners who are listening to this broadcast?
Yes, definitely. For any prisoners that are listening right now to this broadcast, first of all, I want to say solidarity, revolutionary greetings. One of the things is we need prisoners definitely to recognize that, hey, if your block wasn't standing up for this particular strike and the call is made the next time, encourage them to stand up. We are making momentum. We are having a tremendous, strong impact on the nation right now, and we expect to continue to have that strong impact. We're also asking prisoners to join our organization, particularly Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, and they can do that by writing P.O. Box 1076, Knightdale, North Carolina, 27545. Once again, it's P.O. Box 1076, Knightdale, North Carolina, 2754. Jailhouse Lawyers Speak. Write us, access. You can have individual membership. You can also set up to where you can have collective membership. To have collective membership, you will need at least 3 or 4 members on your yard or in whatever prison block you're in. And you can begin to set up a chairman, secretary, and treasurer, and you can begin to organize your cell block, organize your yard for resistance, and we will give you support. We will give you support, whatever support you need to bring awareness to what's going on in your state or your yard. So that's about all I want to give the prisoners. We have to stand up and speak for ourselves, and then get other people to partner with us, you know.
And what do you think is next for abolitionists in the U.S.? Can you suggest what you think comes after the 2018 strike and the support for those who are facing repression from it?
Well, I think the repression will continue. I don't expect that to stop. I think that, but I can tell you this: it's going to be some more activities. Either next year, no later than 2020, will be some more activities. We are pushing very heavily on the ballot issue as it relates to certain issues that are related to the prison class issue. So you'll be hearing more about that as we organize more across the nation for that. This is an area prisons haven't been very strong in. And I just think at the end of the day, you can expect even more changes as we try to fight to dismantle the prison industrial slave complex. And when we say dismantle the prison industrial slave complex, this means that it is a protracted struggle headed towards prison abolition. At the end of the day, this is the ultimate goal, you know, prison abolition for us. So definitely you can expect more resistance, but you can also expect the repression. And I think the repression will get worse, you know, as we destabilize the system more and more through our organizing on the inside. And we're finding that more prisoners are being liberated due to our organizing on the inside. We can expect, and companies are no longer profiting. We can expect it to get worse back here before it gets, before we have any major changes.
Dee, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you specifically want to discuss?
No, I just want to appreciate you for having me on. You know, we're about to run a little count time around here. Me and these pigs about to do their head count. But I want to appreciate you for having me on, man. And anytime, you know, you have a question thing, just reach out. But I'm always grateful for people like yourself, your organizations, just for giving us a voice, man, because that's what it's about at the end of the day. You know, it's the only way we're going to make changes. We have to network. We have to cooperate. We have to work together. I just want to thank you for that.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope we can keep in touch and keep up the good work and stay safe.
All right. Thank you. Salute.
Now we're going to take a quick musical break. This is MC Soul off of the recently released mixtape Nuclear Winter 3. This track is called Three-Way Fight, and it features Decomposure.
But if you're looking for me, I'll be on the block. Hit a black glove, raised up hard, I'm on the top there. Tears of fire, break me, burn brighter. Let me take a rubber bullet if it's like a drone. Cops slicing neighbors with a recess at the top floor. Astro vampire, we're soul survivor. At night I can't sleep, it's getting too real. First they take us for granted, then they tell us to heal. Fuck the system, shut it down with no lights. Please, Lord, don't let me go to jail tonight. If I do, I'll be back tomorrow, and it ain't shit compared to what I'll do to Latinos. Deport 3 to 10 million, that's fucked up. Obama did them same numbers, so what's up? But if you're looking for me, I'll be on the block. Hit a black glove, raised up hard, I'm on the top there. Tears of fire. Slicing neighbors with a recess at the top floor. Astro vampire, we're soul survivor. Another day, another riot. Same block, new normal Democrats in the streets, but we ain't got the same dreams. Or even the same nightmares. We wanna build a new world, not fix this. Real G's don't budge. When Eric King got sentenced, he was mocking the judge. Yeah. This shit ain't a game, so when it's time to organize, I'll be doing my thing. Learn security culture, I'm telling you, man. If the cops come around, don't mention my name. Forgive me, Emma Goldman, I know I ain't done enough. Trying to survive or fighting back, this shit is tough. But it isn't a choice. Self-elected leaders, you ain't speaking for us. They calling for calm, saying we ain't about hate. Speak for yourself, fuck Trump, fuck the law, fuck the state. But if you're looking for me, I'll be on the block. Hit a black glove, raised up hard, I'm on the top there. Tears of fire, break me, burn brighter. Let me take a rubber bullet if it's like a drone. Cops slicing neighbors with a recess at the top floor. Astro vampire, we're soul survivor. Don't be paralyzed, cause them eyes eyes be on ya. Cognitive dissonance has got us outnumbered. It's a three-way fight between the right and the left. So follow the lead if you like walking off cliffs. Lecture about violence, man, save your breath. Everything you take for granted was constructed on death. You want a peaceful protest, there's no such thing. Even civil disobedience is disruption. You better read Howard Zinn before you slur Rosa Parks with your liberal myth. That shit is Noah's Ark. The system's working fine, this is what we should fight. President Trump is what democracy looks like.
Cause if you're looking for me, you can find me on the block, disobeying the law. You beat me cause I'm burying my teeth when you start by the muzzling off. Leave that cruelty, don't fall for normalcy. Institutions won't save you. Compromise and they'll break you. Hold on to the future, don't lose your anger. But if you're looking for me, I'll be on the block. Hit a black glove, raised up, hard, I'm on the top there. Tears of fire, break me, I'll burn brighter. Let me dig her up a bullet if it's not a drone. Cops, slicing neighbors, we're the racist at the top floor. Asheville fire, we're some survivors. But if you're looking for me, I'll be on the block. Hit a black glove, raised up, hard, I'm on the top there.
And now here's A Radio Berlin with their portion of this month's Bad News, Angry Voices from Around the World, focusing on updates on the resistance to the open pit, 33 square mile open pit lignite mine that would replace the Hambach forest in Germany.
And for our last entry, you hear an interview about the struggle for the Hambacher forest.
You recently came back from the Ende Gelände actions in the Hambach forest. Could you please say something about the actions which took place? What kind of actions took place and how were you involved? How long were you there for? And if you have been there before or if you have participated in similar actions before somewhere else?
The Ende Gelände camp action were between the 25th and the 28th of October 2018. On the 25th, there was the eviction of the Ende Gelände camp in Mannheim, and like it happened in the G20 in Hamburg in 2017, like previously eviction of a camp, authorized camp, like a bit before the action days. So it's kind of preventive eviction from the police that just have the goal to give us kind of big problem just before the arriving of thousands of activists for the days. Then on the 26th, there was the reconstruction of the camp in another ground, in a private ground, in Düren, like that is 10 kilometers far away from the ex-Hambacher forest, so from the mine. Like I would just notice here that like in Hamburg in 2017, the comrades were really quick to reconstruct, to build up a new camp. And when I arrived there on the evening of 26th, the camp was really well made. So they were really quick to reconstruct a lot of infrastructure, and I think I was really surprised because like they were really prepared on that situation. On the 27th, there was the big demonstration, and in preparation on that, the activists decided to divide them in 5 fingers, like always. We use always this kind of strategy that is really successful. The fingers were the red, the gold, the zinc, and the pink and the orange. Like always, the fingers were managed by some meeting and assemblies, like the affinity groups, small affinity groups were participating on the meeting of their finger, and then some people from the finger were participating on the big one. And every decision was made with this kind of structure of work, like from the small groups to the big and then on the general. And I think this is kind of really successfully strategy, because in this way the consensus can be really respected, and all the decisions passed by all the people, and all the people can give an opinion and a suggestion on the decision. So in the night between the 26th and 27th, the legal demo in Buer was confirmed. The idea of the fingers was to arrive to Buer, or to arrive like near the mine from different roads. And so in the morning of the 27th, really early, the fingers started walking through the fields in this direction. So the fingers started from the Duren camp. I was in the right finger, and we were together with the gold one. We were stopped like after 6 kilometers, so a bit like in half of the road from the police. We were in Meschenich, and the police was intimating us to don't be too much close to the mine, and to do not cross the autobahn or the railway. Like that happened around midday. Then after 1 hour, we started again our march, and we were in the direction of Tubuer, but after some hundred of meters, we decided to just spontaneously, we moved in the direction of the autobahn, and till there we were like around 2,000 and 3,000, and all of us, like the mostly, gained to arrive to the railway. I think we were like till 5,000, and 2,000 and 3,000 arrived to the railway. Yeah, that is the right number, I think. And so we just ran through the autobahn and through the railway. So that was happened. And the police tried to stop us with pepper spray and water, but they just stopped, kind of, some of us, not all. So we did the block at the end, and was really successful, I think. In this action, some people were stopped by police, and they went to the Geza for a couple of hours. Then on the railway, mostly all of fingers arrived, so us, like the golden and the red, and the pink and silver also. And pink and silver arrived from other route, but they were successfully, they arrived. And so at the end we could say that we were 2,000 or 3,000 on the railway. The orange finger, like around 600 people, gained to arrive to the mine, in the mine, but they were like 400 of them were just arrested, like they were bring to the Geza, like always, and stopped for a few hours. The Geza were many, like between Kohl and Aachen, but there were not just two, there were many, and like a few Geza. So people were also divided in many places. So between like around 1 p.m. and 6 p.m., we were organizing our block in the block, like always in this with this structure of consensum, so from the small groups to the general meeting. And our decision was to stay and to block the railway, because in that moment, the railway, that part of the railway was really important for the mine, for the firma of the mine, and they had to block the train to bring the coal to the stock, to the storage. So was really important for us to stay there, because in this way we could really block the power plant near the mine.
Could you also say something about the current situation in the forest as far as you know it? What was the general atmosphere? What is the state of the forest, the state of the camp? Would you consider the action successful? What are some issues that you think still need to be addressed or considered, like environmental, political, economical, or tactical issues? For example, what happens to the wood that gets cut in the forest?
When we think about the Hambach force, we have to just bring the idea of private property, because that's a private property. It's really incredible, but it's like that. The Hambach force exists not anymore. I mean, it was 4,500 hectares, so really big. And now we can see just 200. The point now in October was that the firma, the RVE, want to use a half of these 200, so really want to destroy the forest. So why the forest is so important? The forest is a natural reserve, should be a natural reserve with some animals that are important for the agroecological system, some bats, some other animals, and in particular the bats are like in extinction danger, because are kind of like they exist in just a few places in Europe, and their population is like really disappearing. So the forest is used from the end of the 70s, from the 78, from the RVE. And they say that with their mines, their power plant and trading platform, they guarantee the security of supply in Germany, in UK and Netherlands, because they also sell to other countries. They say that they supplies electricity and heat securely and flexibly, that they save the business of their customers and employers. But actually they just exploit, they already exploited the forest from the end of 17. What is produced in the mine is lignite. The lignite is brown coal, a soft brown combustible, is a sedimentary rock formed from a naturally compressed pit that they find so under the trees. So to take it out, they need to take out the trees. They destroy them actually, and they have to, then they use the ground. So they have to arrive to 2,000 meters under the ground. As a resource, the brown coal, so the lignite, it is considered the lowest rank of coal due to its relatively low heat content. It has a carbon content around 60-70%, and it is mined all around the world, especially in USA. It is used exclusively as a fuel for steam electric power generation, but it is also mined for its germanium content in China. So in China and USA they really produce a lot. In Europe, the main part of this lignite is between Germany and Russia. So that's why in Germany we have so many lignite mines. It's really, the lignite bring really a lot of pollution because it's too wet, so there is too much humidity, and energetically is really not so much useful. And the result of that is really responsible for the pollution in Germany. Like, you have to think that 1/3 of the emission of the CO2 in the country is because the lignite.